So what's one thing I can do every day to get more people to listen? What's one thing I can do every day or on every episode to get more people to subscribe? And what's one thing I can do on every episode or every day in general to up my consumption rate? Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. I hope you enjoyed the latest episode. It was episode number 33. Does your name and artwork suck? I know that is a tough one to ask and a tough question to answer as well, pardon me. But I think it's very important to talk about that stuff, especially since in the beginning, we don't really know what we're doing. We might just make a name and choose artwork and never change it again. So if you didn't listen to that episode, make sure you go back because that hopefully will create some breakthroughs for you. Today, for episode number 34, what really matters when it comes to podcast ranking. So just as an example, our show, Next Level University, has been in the top 100 in the US and the top 100 in Canada. Right now, we're in the top 100 in several countries, Antigua and Barbuda. There's a bunch. I don't know the specifics right now. I'd have to look, but we're in the top charts. We're on the top charts. And specifically, when I say that, I mean Apple. So right now, we are on the top charts of Apple in certain countries. All that means is if you go onto Apple Podcast and you go to self-improvement and you click on the top 100 within a certain country, you will see us. We will be suggested there. Now, there's a lot of ideas and there's a lot of common misconceptions around how do you get on the charts? What is the algorithm actually looking for? How do you get there? So today I'm going to go through the 3 things that matter most, and I'll add something that it matters, but not as much as you think it does. So most people, they will say, hey, how do I get more reviews? I get asked that question a lot. And honestly, I'm not great at getting reviews. We're not great at getting reviews for podcast for Next Level University. I think we have 190 reviews, which is pretty good. But based on the amount of listens we have, I would like that number to be higher. But here's the thing. We don't really ask that often. But you'll hear a lot of people say, I got to get reviews because I want to rank on Apple Podcast. Believe it or not, the reviews do not matter when it comes to the algorithm for ranking. They do matter when it comes to social proof and, somebody seeing that you have a bunch of reviews and saying, oh, there's a bunch of other people who have listened to this and like it. Maybe I should give this a shot. Reviews are important in terms of social proof and credibility. They aren't necessarily important when it comes to the algorithm that is going to rank your show. So the 3 things. Number 1, how many people are listening? Now, I don't know the exact amount of time that this is based on. And the reason I mention that is when you launch a show, you can rank on the top charts, but it's based on a certain amount of time. I don't know if it's a 24-hour period. I don't know if it's a weekly period. I'm not exactly sure. So that's something I'll do more research on and try to get specific details on. But these are the 3 things that matter. Number 1, listeners. How many people are actually listening to your podcast? How many unique devices are getting listened through? Okay, whether that's your cell phone or desktop. Most people are listening on cell. I think it's like 80 to 90% of people are listening on their cell phones. So number 1, how many people are actually listening? Number 2, how many people are following / subscribe to your show? So if you are looking on Apple Podcasts, there's a button on the top right that is a plus sign. And all that means is I am subscribing to this show. I am following this show. What that's going to do is it's going to show Apple Podcast, oh, people like this enough to make sure that they subscribe so they're not missing any episodes. Interesting. This show must be valuable. That's the way the algorithm works. So how many people are subscribed to your show? And then number 3, and this is an interesting one, completion rate. So what is a completion rate? How many of your listeners are actually listening to a certain percentage? So if you think of it as like a consumption rate, if you are to think what is the average length of listen, that is your consumption rate. So say you have a 20-minute episode and somebody only listens to 10 minutes. Okay, you get a 50% consumption rate, which isn't great. I think you want to aim for, 100% is ideal. Believe it or not, you can actually get over 100%. because say somebody listens to the whole episode and they go back and listen to another piece. So 100% is obviously ideal. I think if you're in the 80 to 90%, you're probably doing a really good job. But that is another important thing that I don't think a lot of us are thinking about. This is why the stats are so important. This is why the analytics are so important. And this is why it's so important to study them. If you don't know how many people are listening, really think about this. And I know it sounds basic, but I have talked to so many people. I talked to somebody yesterday who didn't know any of these things. How many people are listening? How many listeners do you have? Whether that's based on your host platform or based on you logging into Apple, which I'll talk about here at the end. How many people are following your show? How many people are subscribed, right? How many people are actually getting notified every time you drop a new episode? And the people who do listen, how much of the episode are they actually listening to? If you don't know those three things, it's going to be very, very, very hard to win, because if you win, it's just going to kind of be by luck or by chance. Now, here's what most people have yet to do, and completely understandable because there's really nowhere out there that tells you to do this. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to Google and search Apple Podcast Connect. What Apple Podcast Connect is it's basically going to summarize the analytics for Apple Podcast only. So think of it as it's a host in terms of if you're using Buzzsprout, or if you're using Libsyn, if you're using Anchor, Blueberry, whatever host you're using, that gives you all the stats. But it usually only gives you listeners, location, number of downloads. It doesn't really give you the length and the consumption rate. It doesn't really give you subscribers. It doesn't really give you that type of information. But if you search Apple Podcast Connect and then you log in with the Apple ID you use to start your show, it will give you number of listeners. It will give you number of engaged listeners, which I believe is over, they listen to over 50% of the episode, I think. It'll give you followers and subscribers, and it'll also give you completion rate. So you can go in, you can literally look, okay, this episode had 50 listens on Apple Podcast alone. Cool. The completion rate was 80%. Okay, cool. That means out of the 50 people that listened, the majority of them listened to 80%. Or some people listen to 100 and some people listen to 60, whatever.
Hey, Kevin, Kim here. Just wanted to send you a video to say thank you so much for your help on creating the Peaceful Productivity Podcast. I couldn't have done it without you. I knew you'd be lots of great help with the technical aspects of getting the podcast going, but you went well above and beyond that. You helped me with the strategy and you gave me all kinds of really great support. I think the key to success in business is a great attitude. And you have that in spades. You really walk the walk. So thanks again. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
But it's very important to see those statistics because, again, a lot of us are making our decisions based on emotion and not data. If the last 15 episodes you did got 100% consumption rate, you're doing something right. So let's do more of that. If the last 15 episodes you did got a 3% consumption rate, you're probably not doing something right. What could we do different? Are we waiting way too long to get into the meat of the episode? Is your intro too long? Are you having advertisements right at the beginning of your show? Those are telltale signs of, okay, the audience does not like this. How many people are following? Okay, say you have 1,000 listens and there's only 15 people following. Okay, maybe we should talk more about that. Maybe that should be one of our calls to action. So make sure you do that if you haven't done it. Apple Podcast Connect, log in with the Apple ID that you use to create the show, and it's going to give you a good amount of stats. Now, sometimes it's a little wonky where it doesn't give you the last week's worth of stats. So if you have a newer show, it might not be super valuable yet, but it's very important to at least be checking that weekly, monthly, quarterly, because it's going to help you a lot. Now, here's my thought process around this. So if you have a intro and you have an outro on your show, a lot of times people will, on the outro, they'll say, hey, leave me a review, right? Leave me a review, tell a friend, whatever it is. I would say that the most important thing that people can do is probably tell a friend and subscribe. Tell a friend because it's going to help you get more listeners and listens. Subscribe because it's going to help you get your subscriber up and your subscriber percentage up. I think that's probably the best two asks to have. One is going to lead to more listens. One is going to lead to more followers and subscribes. If you want to set things up to get a higher completion rate, what you can always do, and this is a trick people use on YouTube all the time, it'll be like a video on the top 5 ways to grow your business. And in the intro, you say, today I'm going to talk about the top 5 ways to grow your business. Make sure you stick around because there's a bonus one at the end. Or make sure you stick around because number 5 is my favorite. So somebody's already thinking, okay, I got to make it at least to number 5, or they're going to skip there, one of the two. But having these intentions and having these at the top of your mind, okay, more listeners is probably going to come from better social media promotion. It's going to come from better word of mouth. All right, cool. More follows, that's going to come from increasing your listeners and then increasing the amount of asks you have for people to follow. And then completion rate, that's going to come from making sure your episodes are actually valuable. And here's why, if your show isn't good, it's going to be very hard to win because the completion rate matters to a very high degree. So if your microphone audio sucks, people aren't going to stick around for very long. If you have a guest on and their audio sucks, people aren't going to stick around for very long. If you don't have a good intro that tells people what your show is about, people might not stick around for that long, right? So the listens are only 1/3 of the equation. Now, do they pour into everything else? Yes. But here's why when somebody says, how many downloads do you have? How many listens do you have? It's not telling the full story. And it doesn't necessarily, here's the interesting thing, it doesn't necessarily equate to success or not success. The follows and the completion rate are also super important. So just to summarize, number 1, how many people are actually listening to your podcast? Number 2, when are these people becoming followers? So are these people actually following and subscribing? That's the second most important thing, is the number of followers and subscribers. And then number 3, the completion rate, consumption rate. How much of the episode is being consumed on average? That is what the algorithm is looking for. What I would suggest is creating a habit under each of these. So what's one thing I can do every day to get more people to listen? What's one thing I can do every day or on every episode to get more people to subscribe? And what's one thing I can do on every episode or every day in general to up my consumption rate? Those are the 3 things that the algorithm is looking for. So if you can reverse engineer your content based on that, you're probably going to be in a very good place. I wanted to share that because I think a lot of people, there's, you can search what matters for the Apple Podcast ranking, but sometimes it's challenging to find the actual stuff. This I researched, and I also learned a lot about this at PodFest from one of the higher ups at Libsyn. So this is currently what Apple Podcast is looking for. Now, the hard thing is there's Spotify and there's Google Podcasts. They might be looking for different stuff, but I believe 80% of, I think it was 75 to 80% of people are listening on Apple. At least that's our demographic. So I would be curious for you to search on your host platform, how many people are listening on Apple? That's really where you want to chart anyway, because that's the biggest platform for podcasts. So there's a lot of people that think Spotify is overtaking Apple. I don't think that's true. I know Spotify has some big deals with some big shows, but that doesn't necessarily mean the consumer is going to win there. So just a thought. So yeah, I would reverse engineer your content based on this. Let me know if you have any questions when it comes to this. But I think just having the awareness is good. And hopefully this is an episode that's valuable based on, I didn't realize that. Maybe I didn't realize, this is the thing that mattered. Oh, I didn't even know you could subscribe to a podcast. I didn't even know you could track the completion rate. So if you're leaving here with a new awareness, that means you can make a new plan of attack and hopefully do a little bit better. That's all I got for today. A quick one, but hopefully a quick piece of value. Next week for episode number 35, I want to talk about the difference between listens and listeners. So again, we're going to go a little bit deep on what that means and why that's important to you, but it's just a common misconception I see. People assume they need more listeners, and that isn't always the case, and I'll explain why that is. As always, if you want a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session, please reach out to me directly or click the link in the show notes. I did 12 last week, And I learned so much from people and added a lot of value, and I got a lot of really kind words after. So thank you to all that I was able to serve. Again, not going to sell you on anything. I just want to add value and share with you what I've learned over 1,250 plus episodes and being on another 500 episodes. So 715 episodes total. We're coming up on 2,000, which is wild. I never believed we would get here when we started this in 2017. All the love. I appreciate you. Let me know if I can do anything to serve. And as always, keep on crushing it, keep on recording, and keep on podcasting. I will talk to you all next week.